line from the right, the Spitfire, the Mark 9, the North American Mustang, the P-51 and the Corsair.
Has left the ground or a propeller turned, there's an awful amount of work to be done.
An intercooler, because it's really hot at that point. Right. The intercooler's right here.
During the quiet winter season, perhaps the most famous Spitfire of all, MH434, receives its scheduled major maintenance.
So if they're coming up to the hours where the propeller is going to be needing a major overhaul, or an engine, as we've just done with the Spitfire, you schedule that so you have enough hands on deck, enough workforce in the hangar to get that job done.
The inspection takes between 2 and 3 weeks, and then you've then got all the rectification, all the scheduled inspection where parts have to come off.
This time the engine has been built by Maurice Hammond. One company who has developed a specialist niche is Supermarine Era Engineering in Stoke-on-Trent.
This engine is the third Merlin 66 that's gone into the aeroplane since it's been on the British register. It's a zero-timed model. We've had all the ancillaries zero-timed to match the new engine hours. The cost of rebuild, assuming you've got the core, you're looking at about £60,000 to £70,000 to zero time it. You've then got the cost of the ancillaries, which then you can add a few more thousand to that to bring the total cost up to sort of £80,000 to £90,000. The engine in 4 weeks ago, we ran it within 2 weeks. We did have a few problems with the installation, although it's a Merlin 66. There were slight differences from the old engine. So we had problems of adaptation of pipes and routing of pipes and fittings. But we ran it after about 3 weeks, and that highlighted a few more problems.
So you've done the transfer and that will work fine? Excellent. And everything else as before?
We have to tell them all the little ins and outs of it. But yeah, we do tend to be a bit possessive of them.
What do you mean finding the brake? No, the last parts when you just came by straight left, the whistle with the rumble really stinks.
A degree of nerve and brass neck is required because this is an expensive business. It is quite hard to make these aeroplanes keep themselves.
Overseas, it needs to make sure it's got valid insurances for going overseas. It needs to make sure its scope of operation is allowed in that particular country, that's covered in the insurance. It would need overflight permissions from all of the countries, which sometimes can be quite hard to get and can take quite a long time, and there's different requirements for each country. So that's one of the major things you'd have to make sure, because your aircraft can be grounded if you end up, say, in France and you haven't got permission to be in France from the French DGAC, which is their equivalent of our Civil Aviation Authority. They can ground you because you haven't got the right paperwork. You're not allowed to be in that country. Because the airplanes are flown on a permit to fly, they need to have overflight clearances from the countries they're operating in. Obviously not for the UK because they're on the UK register. We'd also, if it was an air show that the aeroplane was going to, wherever it was, we'd have to make sure that all the information has been sent to the air show organisers, so they would have to have copies of all the paperwork with the aeroplanes, all the pilot information, any engineers we were taking, any accommodation requests, any transport requests, all of that stuff, and then on top of that they'd obviously need the marketing material, they'd need to have high resolution pictures for their marketing stuff, they'd need the historical information on the aeroplane, commentary notes, so on and so on, that kind of stuff. Insurance document, the permit to fly, the limitations which are all behind here. So that's obviously one aeroplane, and then you have the Mustang registration, insurance, da-da-da-da-da. And then on pilots, this is obviously for each one. You need to make sure that the pilots know where they're going, so they obviously have to have some maps. I normally would just provide them with an exact sort of map where they're going, with lines on the map that's been provided and agreed with the CAA of where they're going for a private event or something that's just we're involved in. If they're going overseas, it is down to the pilot, and they will have to spend some time with, the bigger, flying maps, and they'd spend time drawing lines on the maps, where they were going, and they have them all folded up, and they'd fold them in a specific way so that they know when they're flying that they can open it and get to the next page or the next page or the next page. But obviously we have to make sure we've got up-to-date maps. So each year you need to go out and buy new maps for them, so you're not using something that's completely out of date.
You want to be in the right position before you even start pulling up, and on plane. And by plane I mean we need to be level, always have the wings level. You can't be out of plane with Ray's wings. So whatever Ray's doing, we have to be parallel, his wings to our wings.
Well, we write to the air attaché at the American Embassy in London, and we send him pictures of the aeroplane, and we explain who we are, what we do, and ask for their written formal agreement that the aeroplane can wear those military markings.
Not only the aircraft, but also the pilots need to be in tip-top condition and totally at one with their position in the formation and the sequences they are to follow.
Yes, you're doing it very gradually. You're going up to, you get 26, you're going up to
My control inputs are going to be a lot more to maintain station, because obviously the airplanes are slowing down now, but we're still carrying a lot of power. So this is where the torque comes in.
The briefings are thorough and detailed and personal. So much so that our cameras were not allowed inside the briefing room. Every pilot on the team is very experienced in all manner of aircraft, from huge 747s to acrobatic pitch specials. But they also must be fully competent in flying a 60-year-old warbird in an exacting routine, in tight formation, watched closely by the public and under the eagle eye of the ex-squadron leader of the Red Arrows. In order to check out a pilot's competence in the aircraft and also his familiarity with the routine, the senior pilots often take them through their paces in pairs, following the leader around and staying in formation.
Here they come in from the right, the Spitfire, the Mark 9, the North American Mustang, the P-51.